Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD tonight. It's a webinar where we talk about Lyme disease. And you create this webinar with your questions, so I look forward to seeing what you have in store for me tonight. For those of you that are new here, welcome. And I'm also glad to see a lot of familiar names on my message board showing up tonight as well, too, which means you're getting value out of these, so that's good. So the way that you participate, a couple ways. Number one, you could, just listen in on the responses that I give to questions, or you can write questions. And the way to write a question to me is if you look on the right-hand side of your computer at the bottom, there is a chat box that you can use to send your questions to me. And I'll try to get to them. So notice the word I said, try. So we've got a lot of participants tonight. I think this is actually the largest audience I've had on a webinar since I started doing these a number of years ago. So I'm glad to see that. But it probably means I won't get to every question tonight. I will try to get to as many as I possibly can. All right. And I intend on spending an hour and a half with you here tonight, unless I just poop out. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm tired of doing these, but keep in mind that I'm meeting with you after a day of doing full patient care here too. So, but I'm hoping that we should have enough time to be able to do this, or that I will be able to spend the whole hour and a half with you tonight. I am creating and recording tonight's webinar, so if you happen to miss something, you'll be able to listen to it again. And I will have that recording ready for you to look at tomorrow morning, somewhere around 9 to 9:30 a.m. Seattle time, so Pacific Standard Time. And the way that you'll know that that video is ready is I will send out an email announcing that it's done, and it will have a link to where you go to watch it. Now, if for some reason you don't get my email, the way that you can find the recording of the webinar is a few ways. Number one, you can find it on the home page, the front page of my supplement store, which is Marty Ross MD Supplements. If you scroll about halfway down on that home page, you can find a copy of the recording, the webinar recording. So that's Marty Ross MD Supplements, and that's the URL for that is treatlyme.com. The other place you can find it is at my Lyme disease information site, and which is Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. And that URL is treatlyme.net. And the best way to look at it there is on the webinars page. And when you look at it there on the webinars page, you actually can access the full 175 or 176, I think, recorded webinars that I have now that have been posted up to YouTube. So you can take a look at all of those, okay? So anyhow, that's what will come out tomorrow. And then tomorrow morning also, I'll have a link to sign up for the next series of webinars. This is our last webinar for January, but I will have webinars beginning in February, and I intend on doing 3 of those in a row. So look for that sign up tomorrow morning so you can sign up for the next series of webinars as well too. Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and get started here. I'm very interested to see what you all have in store for me tonight. Let's see. Let's take the first question. This one's from Ruth. All right. Hello, Ruth. Oh, so everyone, one other thing I need to tell you. If you're participating in the live version of this, you will get to see the question that I'm reading posted on your screen, but these do not show, the posted messages do not show up in the recorded version. So I am going to read them out loud too. All right. So this first one's from Ruth. Ruth says, I worked my way up to the max dose of Disulfiram without any issues at all and no hercs. Then I started to have diarrhea, and it has continued for a month. I stopped Disulfiram to reevaluate what is going on. I'm wondering what kinds of things you would consider or suggest. So Ruth, interesting question. I've actually had one patient of mine that developed diarrhea on Disulfiram, and here's what we did that worked for her. Now, we'll have to see if it works for you if you try it too. But so Disulfiram is a fat-soluble medicine, and meaning it dissolves in fat, okay? Now, because it's fat-soluble, once it gets in you, it actually takes quite a while to get out of your tissues as well too. Things that are fat soluble, sometimes if they're not getting absorbed well enough in your intestines, will wind up sitting there, and they wind up attracting water into your intestines, which leads to diarrhea. All right. So knowing of that, what I wound up doing with one of my patients was to have her open up her Disulfiram capsules and mix them with oil. So she would sprinkle her Disulfiram with a teaspoon of olive oil, for instance, mix it up, and then actually take the teaspoon of olive oil with the disulfiram mixed in, and that was enough to get it so she stopped having diarrhea. And what I think happened with that is mixing the disulfiram in oil increases its ability to be absorbed. Okay, so that's what worked for her. Now, if you do that, if you try it again and you've only been off your disulfiram for, let's say, less than a week or so, you probably could just go right back to the dose that you left off the disulfiram at, because the disulfiram is still in you. All right. When you this disulfiram, probably when you stop it, it takes about a month or more for it to completely get out of you, because it's a fat soluble medicine, and fat soluble medicines take time to get all the way out of the body. Okay. Right. So those are my thoughts. That is what worked well for one of my patients. I've only had to do that one time, but it seemed to have worked very well for her. All right. All right. Good luck to you, Ruth, and thank you for that question. Hello, Megan. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Number one, in the treatment of growing forms of Lyme and Bartonella, as well as persister Bartonella, how long can we expect to need to be on methylene blue to know if it is working or not? Also, have you seen generally that it has been a game changer for your patients yet? All right. Number two, how have you seen your Lyme and co-infection patients responding to the COVID vaccine so far? And number three, is your professional opinion that parasites can harbor Lyme and co-infections, and that doing a parasite cleanse is a necessary step if a patient has not gotten any better after a year or more using the correct treatment for their infections? Okay, all right, I'm going to start with number three. I'm not a big believer in treating parasites as a place where Lyme can hang out. I will treat parasites if I've got somebody with a lot of intestinal symptoms and I remove yeast from their intestines and they're still not doing well, then I may treat for intestinal parasites. But I know there's some research that says that that parasites may be host for Lyme, but in practicality, I don't see any benefit from doing it. And I am not one of the doctors that believes in treating for parasites unless we've got symptoms from those parasites. Okay. All right. Now, for your second question, regarding the COVID vaccine, what I see with the COVID vaccine, I'm not seeing that patients that have Lyme have any adverse reactions more than an average person does to getting the vaccine. So, for instance, getting the COVID vaccine will cause your body to manufacture or will trigger an immune reaction. Okay. As part of that immune reaction, you can get the immune system may manufacture inflammation chemicals called cytokines, which are the same chemicals that get made when you have Lyme in you, and they're made in excess. So most of what we call Lyme symptoms, which is brain fog, muscle aches, fatigue, that kind of stuff, that's excess cytokines causing that. Okay. And when you get the COVID vaccine, that also triggers a temporary cytokine flare too. So it's not uncommon when you get the COVID vaccine for a few days, maybe more, to have more achiness, more fatigue, more brain fog. That does not mean your Lyme got activated, okay? And I'm not seeing in my Lyme patients to have any greater chance of that happening or any worse outcome from that than any other person that would get it. I have had one patient that we just had a discussion about this the other day because she was concerned because she had some worsening, but it was just a temporary 3-day or so worsening that had happened from the increased cytokines, not from her Lyme germ getting worse. Okay. All right. And then let's see, in terms of, so in the world of Lyme, what Megan was talking about here, and in the world of Bartonella, we now know from research that's come out over the last few years, actually 4 years, that Lyme and Bartonella can both exist in growing states and in what are called persister states. Persisters basically are forms of the germs that go into hibernation and they ignore the antibiotics we throw at them. Okay. So that has sparked a lot, or the common antibiotics we throw at them. So that sparked some research that's going on mainly out of 2 labs in the country. One is out of Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Ying Zhang's lab has been looking at what we can do to treat Lyme and Bartonella persisters. And then also Dr. Rahadas's lab out at Stanford, where he discovered disulfiram can be useful against persister Lyme. He's also been looking at various things too. Now, the difference between those two labs is Dr. Ying Zhang's lab at Hopkins has also been doing research on Bartonella. I have not seen anything coming out yet out of Dr. Rahadas's lab about Bartonella. Okay, so most of what we know about Bartonella persisters is coming to us out of Ying Zhang's lab. All right. So what we know from Dr. Ying Zhang's lab, and this is based on some research over the last few years, in addition, a piece that was published in April or May, I think it was April of 2020. In the April 2020 study, Dr. Zhang's lab showed that methylene blue can be an effective agent against persister Bartonella and can break down biofilm. Other research that he did over time also showed that oregano oil can be effective against persister Bartonella and persister Lyme. Previous research he did also showed methylene blue can be effective against persister Lyme as well too. Okay, now in that April study that was published, Dr. Zhang also looked to see, does disulfiram do anything for Bartonella? And the truth is it's not that good. His studies would suggest it doesn't work on Bartonella. And I will reflect with you that has been my clinical experience as well too. I don't rely on disulfiram at all as part of a Bartonella treatment. Okay, all right. So in the world of the Lyme germ, not Bartonella, the world of the Lyme germ, for about 40% of people that take disulfiram, they can get into remission. So disulfiram has been a game changer for 40% of people for Lyme, okay? All right. In terms of Bartonella and using methylene blue or using oregano oil, I have not seen either one of those to have the degree of game-changing effect the way that disulfiram can, all right? In other words, disulfiram puts people into solid remission. What I am seeing with methylene blue for Bartonella and or if I use it for Lyme is it helps. And I am getting some people into remission, maybe 10, maybe 15% of the time, but I'm not seeing it to be the huge game changer. I do believe it is helpful for many though, okay? And as to whether it keeps them permanently in remission, it's hard to say. We've only just started using it over this last year, so I'll have to report back to you later. I usually am, if it's going to give people benefit, usually within about 2 months, I am seeing that oregano as well as methylene blue does give benefit, but I am continuing it longer on the hopes that we still see benefit even if things haven't happened by 2 months, okay? All right. Thanks for that question, Megan, and good luck to you. Hello, Jen. Let's see. Question based on your Lyme treatment protocol. How would you adapt Ultra to treat a child? So in general, Jen, great question. So in general, so first of all, children are not mini adults. Okay, I want to just acknowledge it. I'm going to say it right here at the outset. So they are not small adults. All right. But when it comes to making dosing changes in what I recommend in that protocol, you still kind of dose based upon how big they are compared to an adult. All right. So a lot of the doses that I wrote in my Lyme disease treatment protocol would be for an average adult that's somewhere between 150 to 200 pounds, okay, roughly in that range. All right, so to come up with what you do dosing wise for a child, you need to look at their weight. And if they happen, so I would, and the way that you do that is I would look at the dosing I came up with. You could say it's for a 150-pound adult for this discussion, all right? So if I recommend, for instance, for Otoba and cat's claw, which I like using to treat Lyme, and I recommend trying to work an adult up to 30 drops twice a day for a 50-pound child that is 1/3 the size of that average 150-pound person that I put that dosing in for, you would try to work them up to 10 drops twice a day, so 1/3 of the dose, okay? So first rule of thumb on my protocol is to look at taking your dosing and cutting it down based on that dosing was written for about a 150-pound adult, okay? And use your child's weight and figure out what percent of that they are, all right? Okay, as first observation, okay? Number two, no, actually, that's about the major change I would make. Those are the things I would say. Now, the other thing I will tell you, though, and this is just a general observation, children tend to respond more quickly than adults. So I believe in that protocol, my protocol, I did say that you can expect that an average length on a Bartonella treatment is going to be about 4 to 6 months. And for Lyme, for instance, could be 1 to 2 years. But children tend to respond more quickly. So it may be a shorter period of time. Part of the reason they may respond more quickly is they have better functioning immune systems than in old people like me and in older people in general. Okay. All right. So thanks for that question, Jen. And good luck. Hello, Bill. Let's say hello, Dr. Ross. I've just finished a successful treatment for yeast. During the treatment, I was also taking HMF forte, Saccharomyces boulardii, and corbiotic sensitive. 1 capsule twice daily for each of them. Now that the treatment is over, would you continue taking all of them at the same dosage? So it's a good question. So when you treat yeast, or what happens when you have too many yeast living in your intestines, and I think that's what you're referring to is intestinal yeast overgrowth. So you're what is happening in intestinal yeast overgrowth is you develop too many yeast in the intestines relative to good bacteria. All right, and it can happen when you're in the world of Lyme. When we start treating Lyme, we use antibiotics. We're knocking down good bacteria, which allows yeast that normally live in the intestines to grow too much. All right, so all of us have yeast living in our intestines, even if we don't have too many yeast. But at times they can grow too much. All right. So part of the way of combating those yeast from coming back, even after you've treated with your antifungals and your anti-yeast medicines, is that you need to keep repopulating the intestines with good bacteria. And I like doing so for 6 months to a year, actually, even if I don't have anyone on antibiotics, okay? So what I usually will wind up doing is pick either the HMF or the corbiotic sensitive that you've written here and pick one or the other. And I would do 2 pills of one or the other 1 time a day. You don't need to split it up. You can just take it all at once, okay? In addition, you could continue the Saccharomyces boulardii as 2 pills 1 time a day as well, okay? So HMF forte is a probiotic that has bacteria, human bacteria that normally live in our intestines, all right? Corbiotic sensitive is made up of soil-based probiotics that support the good bacteria in our intestines to do well and to thrive. You could use either one of those, okay? The Saccharomyces boulardii, everyone, is a healthy fungus or a healthy yeast, not candida yeast, which is the bad yeast we're trying to get out, okay? But it's a healthy yeast that promotes good function in the intestines. And that I would take as 2 pills 1 time a day, all right? So if you're looking for a discussion about probiotics, let me show you an article that you can take, that you can look at to get more information about all of these that I just talked about. So I'm going to do a quick screen share here. All right, so this is my Lyme disease information site. I think many of you are aware of it. Earlier tonight, I said if you want to find where to see the video recording, take a look at my webinars page. So you would click there. And here it is down here. All right. So right now on YouTube, apparently I have 178 videos. So if you ever want to see my whole library of videos, you would go right up here to this top, click there, and it literally, you can scroll all the way down here to see all 178 of them that I've done over the years. Okay. All right. So that's how you can do that. And then in terms of probiotics, let's see. I'm just going to do a quick search here. So there's an article I wrote called Probiotics in Lyme Treatment. And this is an article where I describe the different kinds of probiotics and what the difference is between human bacteria and soil-based bacteria and good intestinal yeast, okay? Take a look here and you'll see where I talk about all these various probiotics and why and when you would want to use them, all right? All right. Thanks for the question, Bill. Good luck to you. Hello, Thomas. Let's see. Have you had any clients that have had fecal matter or fecal, you're calling it fecal matter, but it's actually fecal microbiota is the official term, or FMT, fecal microbiota transplant, to restore immune system communication that is hijacked by some of these co-infections. Have you had anybody that's had specifically embryonic stem cell replacement outside of the country? I've heard that's far more effective than what's currently allowed in the United States. All right, so let me try to answer both parts of that question. So FMT, fecal microbiota transplant, is a way of putting good germs back into your intestines when those germs are not doing so well, okay? It is currently allowed and approved for one condition only in the United States, and that is for the treatment of a type of bacteria infection in the intestines called Clostridia difficile. So Clostridia difficile is a bacteria that normally lives in our intestines, and it actually can grow too much when you're on antibiotics. It's a rare bacteria that actually grows too much when you're on antibiotics, and it makes a toxin when it grows too much that causes severe watery diarrhea. There are some people for which standard antibiotic approaches to treating that did not work, and that if you do a fecal microbiota transplant where you either have some a stool put into your rear end or you take it as pills, it can reseed your intestines with good bacteria and can take care of that problem, all right? Now, I have used it before also, or recommended it also, when I have a patient that, as a result of being on antibiotics, starts having terrible intestinal dysfunction that is not due to yeast or small intestine bacteria overgrowth, but it's actually just due to a bad balance of good bacteria in their intestines. I have recommended that before when it was possible to get it, all right? The Food and Drug Administration here a couple of years ago in the States started putting out a lot of rules that basically made it so that it is almost impossible to get fecal microbiotic transplants out of a physician's office unless you have C. difficile, okay? Now, could getting fecal microbiota transplants help your immune system do better? It's possible, but it would only be if you've got such bad GI dysfunction indicating an unhealthy balance of good bacteria that maybe putting other bacteria back in may help your intestines start working better. So keep in mind these bacteria that are in your intestines are there. So to put this in context, if we look at the genetic makeup of our bodies, approximately 90% of the genetic material that is in us is actually from the bacteria and parasites and viruses that live in our intestines, all right? 90%, all right? So there's a lot of stuff in there. And we let those germs live there for some reason. They're not just hanging out there, taking nutrients from us and et cetera. We let them be there. And we let them be there because we're getting stuff from them, all right? One of the things we get is these germs can help with detox. Another thing we get from these germs is that they communicate and send signals to our immune system to work correctly, okay? Another thing they do is they help with microdigestion of food. They may give us things that we don't make enough. Like if we have MTHFR detox issues, they may provide the folate we need, for instance, okay? So they're there for a reason, all right? And so one of the things they can do is send signals to help your immune system work well. So if you have a dysfunctional intestinal system with a lot of gassiness, cramping, diarrhea, loose stools, and you've determined it's not from yeast, and you've determined it's not from having too many bacteria living in your intestines, it's possible getting a fecal microbiota transplant may help them work better, may help your intestinal system work better, and putting those good bacteria in, it may allow signals to be sent to your immune system to work better too. Okay, in theory. All right. Now, having said all of that, I want to let you know there's risk in putting somebody else's poop into you. And that is, you may get germs that aren't supposed to be in you. All right. So you have to kind of weigh out the risk of doing that. And we don't have any studies that have been done that I've seen that say that immune systems actually do work better after having a fecal microbiota transplant. So what I'm talking with you about is in theory. Okay. All right. Whew, that's a lot of stuff. Now, what I just said, I want you to hear is it's hard to get this now in the United States because of rules by the Food and Drug Administration that basically say it can be used for one purpose only. And that's for people that have C. difficile. Okay. All right. Now, embryonics, let's talk about stem cells. So stem cells are the most rudimentary cell in the body that presumably can turn into any tissue, okay? Now, that's in theory. But the most rudimentary cells are the embryonic stem cells, all right? So stem cells that come from an embryo really can turn into any cell. They can turn into blood cells, they can turn into immune cells, they can turn into bone cells, they can turn into connective tissue cells, all right? In the States, you can't get embryonic stem cells because of our rules against abortion, basically, okay? And we have bans on fetal tissue research. We just have bans on getting this stuff. And so therefore, the way that stem cells are done here is they tend to be either what are known as umbilical stem cells or they are fat stem cells. Fat stem cells are pre-programmed to develop into connective tissue, but not into every type of cell in the body. So fat stem cells do not become immune stem cells or immune system cells, for instance. They become fat. They may develop into connective tissue, like around your muscles and your joints, for instance, okay? And umbilical stem cells, again, are going to be more, I believe are going to be more connective tissue and or maybe blood cell stem cells, okay? All right. So not all stem cells become everything, even though they are the most rudimentary. Embryonic stem cells have that potential. All right. Now, when we look at do people get benefit from stem cells when they've had Lyme disease? In theory, maybe. So I hate to say it. In theory, this looks great. What I will tell you is most of the people that have had stem cells here in the States have had it using fat-based stem cells or umbilical stem cells. If we look at whether they really got benefit, I have to point to research that's been done by LymeDisease.org. And LymeDisease.org has a project where they've looked at, they basically have a project called My Lyme Data. And through using My Lyme Data, basically they collect information from patients that have Lyme disease that allow them to ask them questions. And they, I think it was last year or the year before, they asked everyone that was in their data bank, have you tried various alternative treatments and did they work? And what My Lyme Data information tells us is only 3% of people that tried stem cells got benefit. All right. Now, I have to let you know that includes all the fat-based stem cells and all the umbilical stem cells, as well as people that had embryonic stem cells. I have not seen any research that breaks out people that had embryonic stem cells only to see if they could get benefit. In theory, they would have better chance, right? But regarding stem cells, if you have active germs in you, it's not going to get rid of the germs. Stem cells may repair damage created by having had the infection. Embryonic stem cells may make your immune system work better, but it's not a cure for having germs living in you. You still have to get your germs out of you, okay? All right, so those are my thoughts on it, all right? So I'm going to show you a couple pieces at my website that you can look at to get more of this information. So I'm going to do a screen share here again. All right, so I have written an article about stem cells. And where I talk about the different kind of stem cells. And that's this article called About Stem Cell Therapy for Lyme, okay? In general, I think it's a waste of money, to be quite honest with you. And I think a number of the clinics that are doing this are preying upon you. And I even say that about some of my colleagues that are offering this. I don't see the science supporting that it actually is beneficial. It's extremely costly. And according to the data from my Lyme data, it doesn't work that well. Okay. So anyhow, you can find where I talk about the different kinds of stem cells and what they can turn into, et cetera, right here. Okay. All right. The other article that you might want to look at is what alternative therapies work. There's an article I wrote earlier this year, or late at the end of 2020. It's this article called What Works? Navigating Prescription Alternative Medicine Lyme Treatments. And if you scroll all the way down here, this is based on that information from my Lyme data. This chart here is where you're going to find information about stem cell therapies. Only 3% of people that did them found any benefit. Okay, so in general, I think it's a waste of money, and I wish providers weren't offering it. I think they're taking advantage of you. But if you're going to get it done, the only one I would suggest doing would be embryonic, because embryonic has the greatest chance of repairing damaged tissue in you from Lyme. Again, stem cells will not kill germs, though. Okay, all right. Oh, one other thing I'll just point out. I know a lot of people are going to Clinic St. George to get their hyperthermia. That seems to help about 45% of people in this study. I will tell you about that too. I generally see people come back that may have done a little bit better after they had it done, but they quickly eventually go downhill because the hyperthermia really does not provide permanent killing of the germs. Okay, all right. And then finally, I know a lot of people have questions about ozone because they have doctors that recommend it to kill germs. I think the data about whether they really kill germs is not that good. And in fact, there's data that shows it probably doesn't kill germs. And those type of therapies help about 40% of people. I think the way that they really are helping people is that it helps your energy factories called mitochondria work better. But I think a lot of doctors are selling you a bag of goods when they recommend ozone, because there's research that shows ozone, when you take a test tube full of germs and you put ozone in it, it will kill the germs. But if you take that same test tube and you put a little bit of blood in along with the ozone, there is no killing. And the reason there is no killing is that the antioxidants in your blood make it so the ozone is not an effective germ killer. So this is one of those things that I am extremely critical. I think it's kind of, a lot of doctors are buying the equipment, put in their office and trying to get you to come in and do it. I think it's a waste of money for most people, actually. All right. All right, there you go. There's my review of alternative therapies in general. Okay, all right. Thanks for that question, Thomas. All right. Hello, Robert. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Thanks for your help. Always feel much worse with weather changes, especially abrupt changes, and also when there is a full moon. Have you seen this kind of reaction in your practice? Number 2, can Lyme and co-infections affect blood pressure? And number 3, how do you treat neuropathy? All right. So first of all, it's my observation too that there are certain people that on moon cycles, their symptoms will vary with the cycles of the moon. I have no idea why that happens, but I will validate that for you. Yeah, that is a phenomenon. There also are certain people in my practice that do worse with the changes in weather. I don't know why that happens, but it can happen. Not with everyone, but some people it does. Okay. All right. Second part of your question, can Lyme and co-infections affect blood pressure? I have not seen that to be the case. But if blood pressure is elevated, it may be that you have a non-Lyme related condition, right? So we have to be careful with Lyme disease. When somebody has Lyme, it's so easy to say the Lyme caused that and the Lyme caused that, right? But people with Lyme get other healthcare problems, all right? And so, there's a sector of people that will get high blood pressure, whether they have Lyme or don't have Lyme, all right? If you have high blood pressure, it needs to be handled the way it would in anyone that has high blood pressure. It's I have never seen it to be associated with the Lyme germ. Okay. All right. Let's see, your last one. How do you treat neuropathy? Okay, so neuropathy means nerve injury. And in the world of Lyme disease, that often can be due to either the Lyme infection or Bartonella. All right, so step one, make sure you've taken care of your germs. All right, treat your germs. Okay. And so if you have Lyme and you have neuropathy, also make sure that you don't have Bartonella with that. Now, Bartonella testing is not perfect. All right, so often I'm going to make a decision to decide to treat for Bartonella based on if somebody has enough symptoms of Bartonella. And so first of all, so I'll show you an article here in a minute that you can look at later to see, do you have enough symptoms of Bartonella to make sure you don't need to treat Bartonella as part of treating your neuropathy, okay? All right, number two, when nerves get injured, it could be due to damage to the nerve cell membrane, the nerve cell membrane, which is a double layer of fat made up of something called phospholipid fats, okay? Also, when nerves get injured, it may be due to injury also to the cell energy factories called mitochondria. Now, mitochondria are found in every cell, not just nerve cells, okay? But but they can get injured with nerves being injured as well too. All right, now so what you want to do is you want to repair the cell membrane of the nerves, and you also want to get better mitochondria function to heal those nerves too. All right. Now I have a whole article about this too. I'll show you the article in a minute, but here's the key components. Number one, repair the fat membranes of your mitochondria and repair the fat membranes of the cells. And it's the same thing. What I'm going to recommend will take care of both the nerve cell membrane and the mitochondria membranes, okay? So the product I like to do that, I like to use a phospholipid mix, and the product I like is made by a company called Research Nutritionals, and it's called ATP 360. And you want to do 3 pills 1 time a day. All right, now, if you are, and that product has the phospholipid fats in it that make up those membranes. In addition, it has micronutrients in it that help your mitochondria work better, okay? All right, now, one of the micronutrients is coenzyme Q10, and if you happen to be on a malaria or a babesia treatment that involves using atovaquone, malarone, or mepron, you do not want to take something that has CoQ10 in it, okay? So if that's you, then instead of doing the ATP 360 by Research Nutritionals, what I suggest you use is another product by them called NT Factor, and that would be 2 pills 3 times a day. And that mix of phospholipids does not have coenzyme Q10 in it, okay? All right. Second key component of repairing your nerves is to use glutathione. Glutathione is a very powerful antioxidant that is used by the liver for detox, but it also is made in every one of our cells to repair cell damage from the inside of those cells, okay? And so what you want to do, I like using a liposomal variety of glutathione, and what I like using is a product called a Trifortify by Research Nutritionals. And Trifortify is a great liposomal product. Research Nutritionals has done some research showing that it is very well absorbed, that it actually, in fact, does elevate glutathione within red blood cells, is the research they did. But if it's elevating red blood cells, it's probably elevating it in every cell, okay? And so for that, I would do a teaspoonful of their Trifortify product, okay? So at a minimum, to do nerve repair, I want to fix the cell membrane and the mitochondria. That's using the ATP 360 or using the NT factor. And in addition, I want to use glutathione, okay? Now, if you are vegetarian, there's one other step you should take. And that is you should also look at using something called carnitine. And I like using a variety of that called acetyl L-carnitine. So carnitine is a protein you get in red meat, and it is used as a transport vehicle to carry fat to the inside of your mitochondria. And you need to have fat on the inside so that it can be burned into cell fuel, okay? So if you're a vegetarian and you're not having any red meat at all, whether it's from lamb or from beef, then you're probably short on carnitine and you want to take that too. And the way you do that, it's a product I like using for that is a Thorne product called Carnitil. It's a 500 milligram pill, 1 pill 2 times a day. Okay, now, if your neuropathy is bad, I sometimes will also have people take coenzyme Q10 if they're not on any of the babesia treatments I mentioned earlier. And that would be in addition to what you get in the ATP 360. And so I like using 400 milligrams twice a day. And the product I recommend for that is also by Research Nutritionals, is their coenzyme Q10. All right. Now, I've got this all written down for you too. So let me do a quick screen share here for you. All right. So take a look at my section on brain and nerves, and look at this article called Neuropathy Repair, Heal That Tingling, Numbness, and Pain, where I lay out in detail what I just talked about here. Okay. All right. It has the doses and the product recommendations and all that. All right. So I know tonight I'm talking about a number of supplements that I recommend. And if you're wondering where you can find them at my supplement store. And this is where my patients get their supplements, but anyone can order from here. Okay. So for instance, the Trifortify I recommended earlier, you can just come up here and type Trifortify in. And there's my Trifortify products. Okay. Or if I recommend curcumin tonight sometime, you can just type in curcumin up here, and it will show you the various products that I have that have curcumin in them. Okay. All right. So anyone can do this. Keep in mind that if you, so there's 2 advantages to ordering from here. Number one, the products that are actually 3. Number one, I choose products that have a great chance of working. Okay. These are products that actually do have what they say is in them. I have selected these various products so that my patients have good quality. All right. Number 2, you don't pay taxes when you order from me. I pay the taxes for you. Okay. And number 3, I ship for free as long as it's $50 or more in your total order. All right. So if you feel like if you want to know a good source to get them, feel free to use this site as well too. All right. Okay. All right, let's go back. Good luck to you, Robert. Thank you for that question. Hello, Mary. Hi, Dr. Ross. What is your opinion on the COVID mRNA vaccine versus the Johnson & Johnson vaccine coming out that is made from inactivated virus? I have suffered from Lyme and all co-infections for many years and recently have been treated for high mast cell for the past year. I'm concerned about the interaction between this and the vaccines. I've made a lot of progress over the years and wouldn't want to do anything that would make me go backwards. All right. So at this point, I can only comment about the mRNA vaccines because that is the only data that has been released in any way that I can look at it in detail. Okay. So I've been able to look at the same data that the FDA had to use here in the United States for those companies, the mRNA vaccines by Pfizer and Moderna. They had to submit a lot of information to the FDA, and I've been able to review all that. Johnson & Johnson has not provided any meaningful information for me to be able to take a look at, so I can't comment yet about the safety for that. Regarding the mRNA vaccines, though, I am recommending that patients with Lyme disease get it. I do believe they are safe based upon the safety information I have looked at. I do think that there is too great of a risk of harm from getting COVID-19, and that risk of getting harm or death from COVID-19 far outweighs any risk or harm of a vaccine. I will also report to you that a number of my colleagues within iLabs that have Lyme also have been reporting back so far about their experience getting the mRNA vaccines, and they are not having any flare-up permanent. Well, I should say they have vaccine-related inflammation but they are not seeing any flare in their Lyme disease or worsening in their Lyme disease. Okay, now there are a few precautions that I'm suggesting people take. And I have a whole article written about this, and I'll be glad to tell you about it. Number one, if you are a person that has had severe allergic reaction to vaccines, not to food, not to pollens in your environment, but to vaccines, you may want to reconsider getting the vaccine. All right. So your mast cell activation means that you are more prone to allergies. I know that. But that does not mean you're more prone to having an allergic reaction from the vaccine. Okay. All right. All right. And so I don't think it precludes you from getting the vaccine. And I don't think, from what I have seen and of the safety information, also from what I'm now seeing information about people getting vaccinated that have Lyme, I'm not seeing anything worsening for people that have mast cell activation problems. Okay. All right. Second group of people that I'm suggesting show some, at least a consideration. There's a couple other categories to just be aware of. All right. So if you are somebody that has had the flu vaccine before and you've had terrible reactions to it, and that also, actually, let me rephrase that. If you are somebody that has had vaccines before and you've had permanent bad outcomes from them, then you may want to consider not getting this vaccine too. All right. And then the third, and I hope you heard the words I said permanent. I didn't say temporary. I said permanent. Okay. All right. And then number three, if you are a person with Lyme that has autoimmune illness that has been diagnosed either by a rheumatologist or by blood testing that shows that you have some autoimmune illness like elevated ANA or elevated rheumatoid factor, then you should be aware there is a slight increased chance whenever you get any kind of a vaccine, not COVID, but any kind of a vaccine, at developing another autoimmune illness, okay? But I want to put it in context. Having said that, it's just something for you to be aware of, all right? But having said that, let me put that in context, okay? So we know that rheumatoid arthritis, for instance, occurs in 1% of all people in the United States, 1%. So your relative risk by just living in the United States of getting rheumatoid arthritis is 1%. All right. Right. All right. Now, if you get vaccines, your chances of picking up another, if you have one autoimmune illness, your relative risk of picking up another autoimmune illness is about 1.1 to 1.2%. All right. So what that means, for instance, your chance of getting rheumatoid arthritis, which for all people is 1%, you still carry that 1% risk. And you have a relative risk now of getting of 1.1 for getting rheumatoid arthritis. That 0.1 means your risk goes up by 10% of getting rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, but it's 10% of something that only occurs in 1% of the population. That means your relative risk of getting rheumatoid arthritis goes from 1% of all people up to 1.1%. It's still a small chance, okay? So what I would say, Mary, is get it. Unless you have had a severe permanent reaction to another vaccine, or unless you have had a severe allergic reaction to another vaccine as well, too, okay? All right. So let me just show you my article about that, where you can look at this in more detail. Okay, so COVID vaccine. So this COVID vaccine article is primarily a video article. You can take a look at it down here, okay? All right. Thank you, Mary, for that that question. So just so everyone knows, I don't have Lyme disease, all right, but I am scheduled myself to get the COVID vaccine. I have looked at the safety information, and I'm confident enough in it that I'm actually getting the vaccine as well, too. I'm scheduled to get it this coming Monday, mainly because of my risk of as being a healthcare worker. I'm scheduled to getting it, so I'm getting it myself as well, too. All right, and hopefully Hopefully we have the supply for it, but I'm scheduled for it. So we'll see how that all goes. All right. Hello, Heather. Hi, Dr. Ross. Both my chiropractor and rheumatologist are in agreement that I have ankylosing spondylitis. Can this be triggered by Lyme? I have had a bad neck pain, and the rheumatologist wants me to take a course of steroids and then start plaquenil. How safe is plaquenil long term? I'm mainly concerned about the vision side effects. Thanks. All right. So, ankylosing spondylitis is a genetically linked problem where you have a genetic test called an HLA-B27. And if it comes back positive that you have that genetic setup and you have certain types of arthritis in your low back, we call that ankylosing spondylitis. Okay. All right. The only infections that I have, there are, I believe, a type of chlamydia is associated with triggering that, but I have never seen any science that says Lyme triggers it to happen. This could be a situation where you have Lyme and you also happen to be a person separate from having Lyme that got ankylosing spondylitis, okay? I have not seen it to be a cause of ankylosing spondylitis, all right? Keep in mind, people with Lyme also get conditions that anyone can get, okay? All right, so not everything that we get when we have Lyme is caused by Lyme. All right, so I think it's a decent question to ask that, but my experience would say it's not a Lyme-caused problem. Okay, all right. Let's see, plaquenil and steroids. Okay, so steroids are probably not a good idea when you have Lyme. Systemic steroids, like taking a pill or getting IV steroids that go through your system, may suppress your immune system, allowing the Lyme germ to get more active. All right, now. I'm not living in your body, so I don't know how inflamed you are, but if you're terribly inflamed, maybe to get that inflammation under control, steroids might be a good idea, but you need to be aware it may cause your Lyme to get a lot more active, okay? All right. Plaquenil is a quinine medicine, a quinine-like medicine that historically was developed to treat malaria. Doesn't really do a good job against malaria anymore, but it's been repurposed to treat inflammation. And we know from studies, and the number one group of people that actually wind up using Plaquenil are rheumatologists, because it does a good job of lowering cytokine inflammation and relatively good job at cytokine inflammation. I think herbal medicines are better for that. But it also decreases non-cytokine inflammation that we see in autoimmune illnesses as well too. Okay, now there is a risk of Plaquenil in that at higher doses, it could lead to retinitis in your eye, which could cause vision problems and vision damage, okay? But at 200 milligrams twice a day, which is often the dose I'm going to use in Lyme disease to manage inflammation, or I may use it in Lyme. We use Plaquenil in Lyme also because it changes acid levels in your cells, which may make it so your doxycyclines and your tetracyclines and your zithromaxes and your biaxins, all those may work more effectively in the cells when you're on Plaquenil, okay? But at the doses I use it in Lyme, 200 milligrams twice a day in an adult, there is no science that shows it causes retinitis. In fact, I used to send all my patients that I was using it as 200 milligrams twice a day to the eye doctors for regular exams to make sure they weren't getting retinitis. And finally, my eye doctor colleagues called me up and said, hey, stop sending them. At 200 milligrams twice a day, the science says there is not damage to your vision, okay? Now, if your rheumatologist tries to use more than 200 milligrams twice a day, there is a risk, and you would need to have regular eye screening done to make sure that's not developing. But if they stay at 200 milligrams twice a day or less, there is no risk of eye damage from it, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Heather, and thank you for that question. Hello, Diane. Hello, thank you for your work. You're welcome. A friend who has been treating for mold sickness symptoms for a couple of years is now agreeable to getting Lyme testing through IGenex. Previous test was years ago with Quest was negative. We are in heavy Lyme area in Northern California. Which test would you recommend that she get? Do you recommend testing for other co-infections, also BART and Babesia? Again, thank you. All right. So the best Lyme germ test, okay, I didn't say Lyme disease, but I said Lyme germ test, is to get the Lyme immunoblot, not the Western blot, but the immunoblot. Let me explain the difference between those two terms. So IGenex is going to, if you were to call them up, they would want to get you to do one of their panels because they make money from you doing their panels, all right? You don't need their panels. Their panels would have a PCR test, which is a DNA test for Lyme. It would do something called an IFA test, and it would do either a Western blot or an immunoblot. Just get the immunoblot, all right? So the reason I'm not advocating the PCR test is PCR testing will only find Lyme if it's in you about 30% of the time. All right, that's not a good test, all right? The immunoblot is a newer test that IGenex developed about 2, maybe 3 years ago now. And what they're doing with the immunoblot is a test to see if your immune system has created antibodies against 8 different kinds of Lyme germs, all right? Their Western blot traditionally looked to see if you have antibodies against only 2 kinds of Lyme germs. And the standard Western blot that is done by LabCorp and Quest only looks to see if you have antibodies against the original strain of Lyme from Lyme, Connecticut, back in the 70s, all right? So you can already see a problem with that. We have many more strains of Lyme in this country than that original one, right? All right, so now the immunoblot also is designed not only to pick up more strains of the Lyme germ, it also is designed in a way not to have false positive tests. So let me talk about that real quickly. So one of the problems when we're looking to see if you have antibodies that attach to proteins on the Lyme germ, and that's what the Western blot and immunoblot do. They both look to see, are you making antibodies against certain proteins that are found on the covering of the Lyme germ? The problem with that is those proteins in the covering of the Lyme germ have amino acid parts or protein parts that also attract antibodies that are made against viruses like the Epstein-Barr virus and human herpes virus type 6 and cytomegalovirus, all those viruses. Sometimes the antibodies we make against them also cross-react with the Lyme antibodies, all right? So we want to make, what they do at IGenex on the immunoblot is they genetically modify the proteins from these 8 different kinds of Lyme germs to remove the pieces of proteins that would also attract antibodies made against viruses. All right, so you don't get false positive tests either. All right, now IGenex has done validation studies to look at their immunoblot, and what they've done in their validation studies is they've taken known samples of blood, some of which are known to have the infections and some which are known not to have the infections. And they've looked to see how accurate is our test. And what they have found is that in their validation studies, that the immunoblot will pick up Lyme 95% of the time when it's there and will be inaccurate, will give a false positive test 0% of the time. That's pretty good. Their Western blot method has the ability to find Lyme if it's there 80% of the time. And the standard Western blot that is done by LabCorp and Quest will only find it about 60% of the time, okay? So the immunoblot is what you need to look at the Lyme germ, all right? In terms of testing for the co-infections and everything else, if resources, if your friend has tons of resources, great. In which case, I would also get the Bartonella Western blot that can look to see if you have antibodies against 15 kinds of Bartonella. But I probably would not do the Babesia test, all right? But if a friend doesn't have a lot of resources, I would start first just getting the Lyme test done, all right? And the reason is if they have Lyme, that then increases the chances of having co-infections. And you can figure out if you have co-infections based on symptoms without ever doing the Lyme testing. All right, so if you get a positive Western or immunoblot and they have a number of symptoms that say Bartonella and say Babesia, I would just treat based on the symptoms and not waste money doing the testing, okay? All right. Thanks for that question, Diane. Hello, Lynn. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Can you speculate about whether there might be a reason why Lyme patients might be more at risk of becoming long haulers if they get COVID-19? So I don't know that they are having more problems with being long haulers than anyone else, to be quite honest with you. I know some Lyme disease patients that have gotten COVID-19 are now long haulers, but I don't think that it is occurring in any greater possibility with Lyme patients than it is with anyone else. Okay. So I can't speculate on that because I don't think that they have. So in terms of why does anyone become a long hauler? I don't know. I don't think we have enough science, and I would rather not speculate with some science to back that up at this point. Okay. All right. Thanks, Lynn. Hello, Patty. Say hello, Dr. Ross. I have been reading your advice regarding natural sleep aids, as this has been a problem for me through all of this. I have been using a combination of supplements, alpha GABA, which contains L-theanine and melatonin, plus an herbal blend of taurine, 5-HTP, and glycine. I don't understand why some nights it seems to help and other nights not. Falling asleep is not an issue, and I go to bed every night at the same time. Room with air purifier, slightly cool. You recommend liposomal curcumin. Is the Thorn Meriva liposomal? Do histamine issues impact the sleep cycle? I am dealing with Bartonella and mold issues. Thanks so much. I find great value in these sessions. You're welcome, and thanks for your comment there. So liposomal curcumin is the Thorn Meriva 500 SF product. So yes, liposomal, everyone means is microscopically wrapped in fat. Curcumin, as many of you know, I recommend to lower cytokines. And so what cytokines are is they're chemicals made by white blood cells when they see germs and mold toxins. And if the immune system doesn't do a good job getting rid of those, your immune system will make too many cytokines. And too many cytokines disturb your sleep. They also make it so you can't think. They give you low energy. They make you hurt all over. So basically what we call Lyme symptoms are excess cytokine symptoms. So as part of trying to get sleep, I usually recommend people do things to lower cytokines, all right, as part of that, all right? Not the only thing that will work, but as part of that. So the product I do recommend for that curcumin that lowers cytokines is the Thorn Meriva 500 because it's liposomal, which increases its absorption, okay? All right. Let's see. Oh, in terms of histamine issues, I have not seen any correlation between histamine levels and insomnia. I'm not aware of that correlation, nor have I seen it before at all. Okay. All right. And then I know sleep's frustrating. And, if you've tried the various sleep combinations that I recommend, the next step you might, so first of all, one comment on the 5-HTP, it looks like you may have it as a blended product, meaning it's with a number of other herbs. But I do sometimes find it to be more effective if you just break it out by itself and you take anywhere from 200 up to 400 milligrams of it. As a standalone product, that can sometimes make the difference for people to actually keep them out, okay? The other natural remedy, if you have access to it that you might look at, is using a high THC medical marijuana, all right? Now, as I said, if you have access to it, all right? So when it comes to medical marijuana, you're probably familiar with CBD, which is one chemical you can get from marijuana, but then there's also THC, which is the chemical that makes you high when you smoke marijuana, all right? THC does a better job of getting people asleep than the CBD. So if you have access to THC, if you can walk down the street and talk to your bud master at your medical marijuana shop, then talk to them about a product that is higher in THC and see if adding that at night might give you some benefit as well too, okay? And then if that all doesn't work, you may need to consider doing some of the prescription sleep medicines that I write about as well, all right? All right, so I'm just gonna do a quick screen share here, everyone. I'll show you a few things to take a look at. Okay, so I know I just started talking about marijuana. Yes, I do have an article on that. It's this article here, Medical Marijuana, Cannabis, and CBD for Lyme, where I review the very limited science out there, but talk about the difference between THC and CBD and in which situations might you want to use one versus the other. Okay, all right. All right, then terms of sleep, I have a whole chapter on sleep somewhere here. Here it is. And I talk about basic steps to get asleep, and you're doing a lot of those. So, I mean, I compliment you on that. I talk about the natural medicines, and I also talk about prescription medicines. Okay. All right. So take a look at all of those. All right. Thanks for your question, Patty. Good luck to you. Marquetta says, hello, everyone. Hello back to you. Hello, Karen. Let's say hello, doctor. My doctor has just started Baluki to my already extensive protocol. Does brand matter? So Baluki, everyone, is a product that has lumbrokinase in it, which is an enzyme. Lumbrokinase can be useful at breaking down biofilms, all right? And so in terms of whether Baluki has a better lumbrokinase than other brands, not necessarily. The two brands that I like for lumbrokinase are either Baluki, it's reasonable, or I also work with an allergy research product that I've had good success with as well too, and I trust the quality of it. So either one of those would be reasonable ways to do it. Okay. All right. Thanks for that question, Karen. Good luck to you. Let's see here. Oops. Sorry. I think, Linda, I may have just gotten rid of your question. I was trying to post it and I hit the delete button by accident. I apologize for that. Let's see here. Hello, John. And so, Linda, I hadn't read your question other than to see your name on it, but so I'm sorry, I can't respond to it. All right. Unless there's a way that I can see what I deleted. I'll look for that here in a minute. Hi, John. Let's see. Liposomal oregano for Bart. I have a 150 milligram pill. Should I take once a day or twice? So, John, take a look at the pills. If this is there's a product out there made by doctor-inspired formulations that the label says 150 milligrams, but you have to read it. It's a serving size of 2 pills. All right. So on the doctor-inspired formulations, liposomal oregano, that 150 milligrams is actually for 2 pills. All right. So each pill is a 75 milligram pill. All right. And so I usually use 75 milligrams twice a day. Okay. All right. Thanks for that question and good luck. I guess I don't think I see a way to pull an old question back up, Linda, so I apologize for that. Hello, Susan. Let's see. Have you ever heard of using insulin to treat Lyme? You know, I am aware that there is somebody out there that has a theory that causing low sugar with insulin is a way to treat Lyme. I have not seen any science supporting that. Okay. That's all I can really say about it. Hello, Karen, again. Let's see. What does Baluki actually do? So Baluki, again, it's lumbrokinase, and we can use it for a couple reasons in Lyme. Number one, so what lumbrokinase is, it's a group of enzymes that come from earthworms. I love the things we have to do in this world of Lyme disease. But yes, we use medicine from earthworms. And these enzymes actually break down a blood clotting protein called fibrin. So there is in our blood, there's something called fibrinogen that is turned into fibrin. Now, biofilms, many of you are familiar with biofilms, are basically a sugar slime layer that is held together in a protein skeleton made up of fibrin. And so bacteria take fibrinogen out of your blood and convert it over into fibrin. They put the skeleton together and then they excrete this sugar slime, and that's a biofilm. Right? So one of the things you can do to break down biofilms that could be blocking your immune system from getting at your germs and could be blocking antibiotics from getting at your germs is to break down that biofilm. And a lumbar kinase can, in theory, can break apart that protein skeleton so the biofilm falls apart, okay? Now, before every one of you starts rushing out thinking, you got to do something for your biofilms, I want you to hear one thing. So there's research that was done probably about, gosh, I think it may be about 10 years or so or more. Dr. Eva Shapi, that's SAPI, has a Lyme disease research lab in New Haven, Connecticut. Many of you may be familiar with her. And she conducted a number of studies. One that got printed in the Townsend newsletter maybe about 10 years ago, where she looked at various ways to help kill germs and remove biofilms. And what she was able to show is that most prescription antibiotics to some degree will break apart biofilm. All right. So for instance, tinidazole, an antibiotic we use to treat the cyst form of Lyme germs, can break apart about 95% of biofilm in her experiments. Okay. The herbal antibiotics, Otoba and cat's claw, break apart 100% of biofilm in addition to killing germs. And I believe our experiments said doxycycline, I think, got rid of about 70% of biofilm. Anyhow, the point I'm trying to raise here is antibiotics, herbal and prescription, probably break apart biofilm too by killing germs within the biofilm. And in addition, getting rid of the Lyme germ and co-infections too. What I like to do regarding biofilm treatments is I usually don't consider adding a specific anti-biofilm agent until I have somebody in treatment for about 6 to 9 months. And if we're getting nowhere with their treatment, then I might add a specific anti-biofilm agent like a lumbar kinase, okay? All right. Now, the other thing lumbar kinase can do is if you've got somebody that has problems with blood flow, like they have Raynaud's phenomenon, for instance, sometimes thinning their blood out just a little bit with Baluchi by breaking down those blood clotting proteins can sometimes be helpful with that as well too. Okay? All right. Thanks for the question, Karen. Hello, Gail. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I saw an ear, nose, and throat doctor for left ear pain, and there is no fluid or redness, and it looks normal. Excuse me, just a minute here. Let's see. When I take a deep breath, when upright at the end of the breath, I get a sense of fullness and sharp pain in my ear. When I get in bed, as soon as I lay supine, normal breathing on the in-breath gives me a stronger sense of fullness and very sharp pain. I've been unable to sleep for 6 nights and I'm going insane. My upper left molars were recently cleaned and I had x-rays and they were fine. My sinuses and throat are fine. If I sleep on my left ear, it feels bulging and unbearable. I'm taking ibuprofen 600 milligrams every 6 hours. I don't know what to do. Could this be nerve pain from Lyme or Bart? If so, why would it hurt 99% more when I lay down? Do the cranial nerves innervate the eustachian tube? Can the nerves themselves become infected, inflamed? And if so, do you think that could cause the symptoms I'm having? Neuralgia maybe. Why those so much more pain when I lay down? Boy, Gail, I don't know. I'm stumped by this one as well, too. The fact, let me just read a second here. Bear with me. I want to look back at part of your question here. So the fact that this has some relationship to breathing still makes me wonder about eustachian tube dysfunction. Now, so the eustachian tube is the tube that runs from behind your eardrum and comes out around your tonsils. And even though the ear, nose, and throat doctor looked in there and wasn't seeing any fluid built up, that doesn't mean that what the eustachian tube is supposed to do is supposed to stay open all the time, so you keep equal pressure on both sides of the eardrum. Now, if it's not working, sometimes you can see fluid that builds up behind the eardrum, or you see bulging of the eardrum. And that's what the ear, nose, and throat doctor was looking for. But it's still possible that in an upright position, when your ear, nose, and throat doctor looked in you, everything looked fine. But it may still be that the tube isn't working correct when you take a deep breath in or you lay back. So it's a tough situation. You might just experiment, see if taking antihistamines would help. Sometimes if you have low-grade allergies, it causes the cells that line the inside of your eustachian tube to swell, partially blocking the opening. And maybe when you're in a laying down position, it causes complete blocking because they're already partially blocked, okay? You might try antihistamines for a week and see if they make a difference. You might try quercetin, 250 milligrams, 2 pills 3 times a day for a week, and see if it makes a difference. Quercetin stabilizes your mast cells so they don't make histamines, leading to that inflammation, okay? But gosh, that's about the only idea I have. I don't have another idea for you here tonight. I'm sorry to hear this is happening with you. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Lisa. Let's see. What is the best way to treat Bartonella? And I really want you to be my doctor. Well, I'll show you how that could happen in a minute here. So Bartonella, and I'll show you the article I've written about that too. But so for Bartonella, based on the research that got published first at the end of 2019, where we now know Bartonella has persisters in addition to growing forms, and research published in April of 2020 that showed we can do things about the persisters. We now, to build an ideal treatment for Bartonella means you have to treat growing forms of the germ as well as persister forms, okay? Right. The research that was published by Johns Hopkins in April showed that 2 classes of antibiotics work best for the growing form. And that is to use a macrolide like azithromycin coupled with a rifamycin like rifampin. And I find the treatments work best if you use at least 2 prescription antibiotics for the growing form. So I usually will start people on azithromycin and couple that with rifampin. I also like to have them on at least 1 agent to deal with persisters. And in my practice, I tend to start people on liposomal oregano oil, 75 milligrams twice a day. But if that's not working well enough, I may add to it methylene blue, 50 milligrams twice a day, okay? So those are some things that I would look at. All right, I've got an article about this that I'll be glad to show you here. Okay, so in terms of what are you wondering what I would use to treat any condition, take a look at my online guide here. Take a look at the infection treatment plan section. And then in terms of Bartonella, take a look at this article here where I outline what I just told you. Okay, right. Then in terms of becoming a patient, this is for anyone. Take a look click on the clinic link here, and it's going to bring you over to my practice website. So my practice is called Marty Ross MD Healing Arts. At this point, all of my appointments are telemedicine appointments because of COVID-19. And there's 2 ways you could visit with me. One is to do something called a full medical service. The other is limited consult service. And I explain the differences between both of those down here. Basically, the full medical I can prescribe for you and I can order tests, but it requires that at some point in the future, when coronavirus gets under control, that you will have to come out here for an in-office visit, okay? Otherwise, you could look at doing this option 2, which is a limited consult service where I give you advice, but you're going to need to work out doing what I suggest with your doctor based on what we do in the visit. In terms of how much it costs, take a look in both of these on this visit length and cost section, and there's forms you need to fill out too, okay? All right, so if you are interested in that, then you can set up the appointment by clicking that Book Now button, all right? There you go. All right. Good luck to you, Lisa. Hello, Athena. Let's see. Thank you, Dr. Ross, for your commitment to this patient population. You're welcome. I'm interested in the botanical approaches and whether you feel there is value in the rotation of antimicrobials and your opinion regarding address viruses as playing a significant role in MSIDS. P.S. Thanks for doing all this after a full day. You're welcome. One of the things I'm going to be doing here in a little bit here, I see we got about 8 more minutes. I'm going home to exercise to energize before I spend time doing my video editing. So, got to get my 2 Basenji dogs out for a walk. Let me see. Is one of them back there? No, they're both laying under my desk, it looks like. But I bring 2 dogs to work with me here. But anyhow, in terms of viruses, let me start with that first. So in terms of viruses, I know that Dr. Horowitz writes about the viruses as part of his protocol. I do at times address viruses, but I would just want to throw caution out. So the trouble is with the chronic viruses like Epstein-Barr, human herpes virus type 6, human herpes virus type 8, parvovirus B19, all those viruses, is that they are common in healthy people. All right. So, and the way that most doctors look to see if you have viruses is they do antibody measurements. And they assume if you're making high levels of antibodies that it must mean that these viruses are active and you got to do something about it. All right. But that's not so. Keep in mind that if we were to pull 100 healthy people off the street, I would find evidence in 10 to 20% of those people of having elevated antibodies against any one of those viruses I just mentioned, okay? These are healthy people. So finding elevated antibodies does not mean that the germs are in any way hurting you. It could just mean your immune system is doing what it's supposed to do, which is keeping the germs under control, all right? So in my practice, what I do, I don't like doing the routine measurements of antibodies because if I find that they're elevated, it doesn't mean that those viruses are causing a problem. I will start wondering about chronic viruses being in the way of getting better if we're about 9 months or so into treatment and I'm not making any headway with the patient, all right? So what the idea behind that is that if you have these chronic viruses and if they did get active, it means that there's some degree of immune suppression probably allowing them to get active. The thing that would be leading to that immune suppression would be your Lyme infection and co-infections. So my approach is to basically treat Lyme and co-infections, knock them down, because if we do that, the immune system should turn back on to deal with these infections that cohabitate with us, and in most people don't cause any problems, okay? Also, as part of my Lyme treatment, I'm supporting the adrenals. I'm having people get sleep. I'm lowering cytokines. These are all things that support the immune system, so it will put those germs back under control, okay? Now, if I'm about 9 months into treatment and somebody is having a hard time still, I might start looking to see are the viruses in them and active. And the way that I like to see if they're active is I like to measure a blood test called nagalase. Nagalase is an enzyme that is made in virus coats. And it's made by viruses to try to inactivate your immune system, part of your immune system. And what it does is nagalase breaks off a sugar group from a chemical called macrophage activating factor that activates an antivirus white blood cell called macrophages, okay? So if you have elevated nagalase, it's a way of measuring, do you have elevated viral load in your body, meaning your immune system did lose the battle, okay? All right. But I'll only do that about 9 months in because my approach is let's deal with Lyme. Let's fix your immune system by supporting your adrenals, getting you some sleep, lowering your cytokines. Let's go that way first for about 9 months. And even if these things got active, the immune system should be able to put them back under control again. Okay, that's what my approach is to it. All right. Now, Dr. Horowitz, on the other hand, likes to throw everything that he possibly can at somebody right away. And I think it can be overkill at times. All right. So I usually will my approach is, and the other thing I would say about my approach is I don't believe you have to fix everything that's wrong to get a person right. You just got to fix the key things to get enough of the health problems dealt with so that the body can start taking care of itself too. Okay. All right. Anyhow, all right. Regarding rotating herbs, I don't find any benefit in rotating your antimicrobials. I just don't. I usually will put people on something that I think is going to work and leave them on it for a good 6 to 9 months. And my patients do quite well with that. Okay. All right. Thanks for that question. And good luck to you. Hello, Marie. Let's see. Good evening, Dr. Ross. This is not a question, but a thank you. I have Lyme and Babesia and was unfortunate to contact COVID-19, the new variant in the UK. I followed your advice with taking curcumin, zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D, probiotics, etc. Please follow Dr. Ross's advice. It definitely helped me and my daughter from getting too sick. Marie, thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad that you all were able to get through that without any undue harm from it too. So I appreciate that. Okay. And good luck with everything. And so let me just show everyone what Marie's talking about. I do have an article about what do you do for COVID. There's some natural as well as prescription options available to that. Let me do a screen share here. All right, so for my COVID article, and just come up to the search bar and type COVID. All right, and it's an article I actually updated in December. And so in here I have herbal and prescription options. The big thing I want to point out is there's some things that I talk about in terms of what I have a whole section that ultimately is recommendations, and I talk about a number of herbs. The big thing, though, that I have added to this most recent update is I now talk about using something called ivermectin if you've got COVID or if you've been exposed to somebody with COVID. Now, ivermectin is an anti-parasitic medicine that has been shown that may or may not have big benefit for people with COVID. And let me just say something about that. So there's some research that is not good quality science. It's more observational studies that is suggesting if we use ivermectin that we can shorten the severity and the duration of COVID-19. Ivermectin has some antiviral properties in the way that it works, in addition to being an antiparasitic. Now, it has been controversial to use ivermectin. Recently here in the States, the NIH, National Institutes of Health, reviewed the science and now says it cannot make a recommendation for or against the effectiveness of it. So they didn't say it's not effective, but what they say is due to the quality of science, we can't tell for sure. There haven't been large enough studies done, and we don't have adequate randomized studies. But based on case reports and retrospective studies looking back at what happened with people, there may be benefit. Okay? All right. So I just want you all to know that. It sometimes is hard to get that medication or hard to get doctors to prescribe it, but I am using it as part of my regimen in addition to a number of the supplements that I recommended. Marie, thank you again. And so everyone, that's it for me for tonight. It's been great being here with you again. Tomorrow morning, somewhere between 9 and 9:30 in Seattle, I will send out an email to you announcing that the recording is ready for your review. All right. And again, in there, I will have a link to sign up for the series of webinars in February. I would ask every one of you to do one thing for me, though. I want to help a lot of people. I want people to get over Lyme, and I want them to have access to information that they can take to their doctors who may not be Lyme friendly or Lyme aware and give it to them so that they get better as well too. All right. So you can help me do that. So if you have people, that have Lyme that you think could benefit from what we're doing here, send them the email tomorrow morning after you get it. And when you get the next email from me saying sign up for the next webinar, send that to them too, okay? Also, let people know about my Lyme disease information site. More people that know that, the more readers, the more the information gets out there, okay? So join me. I hope you'll help me with my mission to help as many people as possible, all right? All right. Good night, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks. Bye-bye.